Hello and welcome to another Dragonstorm Studios video. And today we're going to get some practice drawing fabrics. And one of the greatest ways of doing that, I think anyways, is by creating some sort of hooded figure, because that gives us fabric not only at the top of our character's body, but also we can add a cloak to that hood and do all sorts of great things with that. So we're gonna give that a shot and see how it turns out. So I'm just gonna start with some basic head shapes there, and then we're going to have the cloak, or the hood I guess, kind of coming from over here, and it's gonna come down these wavy folds, and we might have our character over here with holding a sword, perhaps. Ooh, 4, 5 knuckles in the fist, and arm coming back. We'll have them kind of lunging forward, and maybe they're kind of in mid leap, perhaps. They're leaping forward, and we can draw them in there. Hands splayed out, as if trying to get their balance, perhaps. One of the key things about drawing any kind of fabrics really is kind of just thinking about where things would go and where all of our lines will be. How gravity and wind will affect all of our different lines here and there. And we'll have the cloak come up forward here. So that's a good start for us. Again, very, very basic. If you've watched these videos before, you know that I'm all about just getting the lines in the right spot first. Just kind of set myself up, and then we can kind of take it a little bit further from there as much as possible. We'll maybe make this a katana blade here. That could be very interesting looking. All right, so I'm going to refine some of these lines as I always do, and I'll come back in a moment. We'll take a look and see exactly how this turns out. All right, so I'm going to zoom out at this point, and you can kind of see where all of those details have been kind of refined here and there. So I took a bit more time to work out the size of the head compared to the hands, and I've added in just a little bit more detail with the folds and pleats of the fabric. So you'll notice that what I did earlier is kind of just get a basic strong line for the curve, and then just figure out where we'd get overlap and where we'd get the fabric overlapping. And once you've kind of worked that out, the rest of the job is really quite easy, because the drawing really finishes itself essentially, because you've got those lines, those folds that really give it a sense of realism. And again, thinking about where the light's coming from is very important. So you can see here I've already started darkening areas here, the bottom of the picture. So I'd get some shadows and shading cast below the hood here, for example. And then where the fabric would bunch up here, where it's lighter, we'd get darker beneath it. And that just allows us to think about the light and how it's impacting our fabric. So darker down here, darker up here, lighter in the middle. And this will be nice and dark as well below the jawline. I made the head a bit bigger as well, because I figured one thing I often will do is make the hands too big, especially on a female character, because I end up using my own hands as reference. And if you have bigger hands, then that will mean more problems when it comes to trying to portray someone who really should have smaller limbs and smaller hands and feet. So something which I'm still working on myself. All right, so we've got some detail there. I'm going to work on the face some more. You'll notice that I've really paid attention to where not only it folds, but also where you get stretching of the fabric as well. And that creates some pretty strong lines here as well. I've got the character's legs down here, so I'm probably going to end up adding some either bandages or other ribbons or things flying around as well, just to give the piece a bit more sense of movement and of rhythm as well. We'll see how it turns out. All right, so as I add some more details to the picture itself is looking better, but all of those lines in the cloak are still there and really give a really neat sense of realism to the piece and to the costume. And it's interesting because when I was a kid, just as I was getting out of comic books, just as kind of things were getting a little bit too real, people, a lot of characters were dying in comic books, and that was, I don't know, I wasn't really ready for that. There was a splinter group of artists from Marvel that created Image Comics, and one of them was Todd McFarlane, and his character Spawn had the most amazing cape, and it really opened my eyes to drawing the costume in more detail. The capes in particular, I really loved just what you could do. I never really thought about the dynamics of fabric until that point. It was so cool to create. So you can see down here, I've got some folds and some cloak, and all that really is a bunch of repeating kind of almost like fractal shapes where the fabric just gets pulled into another direction. And that effect creates a really unique kind of like starchy sort of fabric where it's very stiff, but it looks really good. And we'll go into more detail with things that are a little bit less epic looking, like shirts and sweaters in the next video. But this gives you a sense of the kinds of folds that you can create. And this is an extreme example, but that's on purpose just to kind of get some practice with these kinds of effects, just to get used to the idea of thinking about the way that fabrics will be pulled. And we've got obviously the hair coming out from the hood here to show like a wind effect, and you're getting all sorts of pulls, all sorts of forces at work against the fabrics. So I'm going to keep working on that, but it's looking pretty good. Again, the pull effect really does kind of give, or I guess adds weight to the movement in the piece, which is really nice. And the more shadows and shading we add, once again, the better it looks, although you're probably sick of hearing me saying that by now. So we'll keep at it and see how it turns out here. All right, and as we finish off the shading, essentially what we're doing is we're masking, or we're blending in, smudging some of the lines that we put into our work, making them more subtle. So don't worry if they start off looking a little bit too cartoony, too pronounced, because as we start shading in and over our fabric, it makes the folds and those stress lines, those pressure lines, they're pulling the fabric a little bit more subtle. And then what we can do, if ever we have overlap, wherever one part of fabric overlaps another, we can just darken that in, and that just gives it, again, more sense of shadow, more sense of depth in the work. And the more we add of that, the better it starts to look. So already we can see it coming along nicely here. I've thought about my light sources, I've put in my dark areas. We can see all over the place. We've got some great folds. We've got some great effects going on there. So as I finish off, I'm just going to remind you that the content you see here is certainly something which I am much appreciating in terms of the comments that I've been receiving, in terms of the requests that I've gotten. If you have any requests, please feel free to leave me a comment below. And I'm very glad to tackle any sorts of challenges you see fit. And please feel free also to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content that you see. So have yourself a fantastic day, and we will see you next time.